Well, I think this might be the fastest that any game has ever gotten a sequel. Astro Wars 2 happened to get released on the exact same day as Astro Wars 1, which might be why Epoch played up the subtitle Battle in Galaxy. And one thing that you're going to notice immediately is that Astro Wars and Astro Wars 2 share quite a few assets. The music in both games is exactly the same, so is the sprite for your spaceship, and the sprite for the alien mothership. The plot is basically the same as the first game. Emperor Cruz is invading, and you need to take a Scepter spaceship out to intercept him and his flagship. And like the first game, this is a single-screen arcade shooter where there's two phases, one where you destroy all of the released enemies, and one where you take on the battleship directly. This time, the influence is much more direct. Astro Wars 2 Battle in Galaxy is clearly a takeoff on Galaxian. There's a large formation of ships that are deployed at the start of a stage, and they swoop down and fire shots at you. You can only move back and forth at the bottom of the screen, and both buttons on the controller take a shot. The Scepter has been slightly upgraded since that first battle. Now it can fire 2 shots at once. Before, you could only have 1 shot out at a time. They give you 8 lives to start out with, regardless of whether you are playing on amateur or pro difficulty. And you're going to need them because the enemies here are way more aggressive than they ever were in Galaxian. This game is a showcase for how many sprites the Super Cassette Vision can push simultaneously. While not all of them are swooping in a complex pattern, a lot of them are, and it's doing all this with no slowdown or flicker. You're going to get overwhelmed and have something just slam into you. And even if there's just a couple of ships left, they still move so erratically that they're a hazard. Once you have that mothership on its own, things should be easy, right? Well, let's start spitting out a continuous stream of zigzagging spacecraft, a regular fire hose of enemies. It is possible to shoot through the stream and hit the battleship. In fact, you're going to have to if you want to beat it before the timer reaches 0. Once the ship is destroyed, or time runs out, then you advance to the next stage where you do it again, except the enemies are even faster and more active. That's really all there is to this one. Astro Wars 2 Battle in Galaxy is a very simple game. No power-ups, not even complicated enemy patterns. It's just your 8 lives against an overwhelming tidal wave of foes. It felt like the game was designed for people who had mastered Galaxian and were ready to move up to the next challenge, which again kind of signals how Epoch was stuck in the past. If it wasn't for the sheer quantity of sprites dancing around on the screen, this wouldn't be any different from an arcade game that you could find in 1979. It's not a bad thing to have a game in that kind of style, especially in 1984 when it's still fresh in people's memories. But over on the Famicom, they're playing the hottest arcade games of 1983, as well as ports of recent computer games. Astro Wars 2 did give players some gosh wow factor, but it still would have felt like a throwback at the time. In spite of the limitations, this is still a pretty neat game, and it's interesting to see how Epoch expanded Galaxian to make it much more difficult, even with 8 lives. I just wouldn't want to play it for a very long session.